Okay, let's get started. So this topic I'm about to talk to you about is really important to me because it kind of changed my life a little bit and made me a much happier, much better community member, and I'm really happy to tell you a little bit about it today. So in order to get started, I'm going to tell you a little bit about me, and in order to do that, we're going to hop on a time travel machine and go back to the year 2012. And I'm going to introduce you to a good friend of mine, Ramon. So that was me 3 years ago. Say hi to everyone, Ramon. And please, tell everyone about yourself. Yeah, he's shy. You'll have to forgive him. I'll go ahead. Well, Ramon is a Chilean kid living in Vienna, Austria. And don't let his appearance fool you. He's quite happy. He's by sheer luck landed a job in doing some Mac development using Ruby as his tool chain, and he's really happy doing it. You know, he's learned a ton from his mentor, and he's been really, making his stride. He's making his place, and he loves every second of it. But it's been 2 years now that he's been doing it, 2012, and he's been getting an itch, He's been hearing about open source software and communities and conferences and workshops and boot camps, and he's wanting to take part of it, but, he's just been programming for 2 years. He wouldn't know where to start. He doesn't feel good enough to do it. So Ramon decided to, nevertheless, take a step out of his comfort zone and go to a local developer meetup for Mac programmers. And he went into this happy, hacky lab, co-working space kind of thing, and he immediately felt out of place. Simply because, there were people there who seemed so much smarter than him, so much better than him, arguing about Vims and Emacs and who knows what. He was happy in Xcode doing his thing. And it got a little bit too intense for him. So after a while, he basically just went back to his little hobbit hole, feeling pretty bad about himself. But nevertheless, he still felt this urge to get out there and, get to know people and contribute because, so much has been given to him, and, it's only fair that he gives a little back. So he thought to himself, well, if I can't contribute, if I don't feel ready to contribute, what if I instead introduce people to programming? And so Ramon and his girlfriend decided to open an after-school activities where after their class kids could come in and learn a little bit about programming and about game design, and they called it computer game programming. And it's really great. This is at the Vienna International School, and they were really kind to us to lend us some laptops and some children to experiment on. And the kids are fantastic. They're a very diverse group. And more often than not, we've had sometimes more girls than boys, which was really neat to see. Just an incredibly diverse sort. And so the way computer game programming worked is that we'd get together once a week for about an hour to learn a little bit, have some fun, make some games. And I tell them at the beginning of the year, kids, I want you to go out there and I want you to feel like hackers, right? Like really clever hackers. And of course, they'd start giggling to each other and talking about like hacking each other's Facebook or hacking Minecraft or who knows what. And I tell them, but when I say hacker, I don't mean the businessman in the ski mask trying to hack and steal your bank account, I meant someone who was clever, someone who could go around the rules and, try to improve things in a way that perhaps hadn't been thought of before. And so, I've always been a big fan of the Ruby programming language because I think it's just a ton of fun to use, and it makes programmers happy, as they say. And so we introduced the kids to programming with Ruby using a gem for making games. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called Gosu. And it's a ton of fun. If you haven't tried it yet, I'd really recommend it because it allows you to make games really, really nicely in a multi-platform environment. So when you start teaching somebody to program, it's probably a good idea to do some research about what are good techniques for doing so. or consult some experts, or talk to somebody about it. But in my infinite wisdom at the time, I decided to instead jump in head first, not anticipating that there'd be so much trouble. I mean, I do it every day. How hard can it be to teach it? And it turns out it was pretty tough at first. And there's a ton of difficulties I came upon. And one more practical challenge I came about is that it's an after-school activity. It's the end of the day. The kids are tired. I'm trying to keep them engaged, keep them interested, and compete with all the other activities that they're doing during the day. And you might say, well, if it's just an hour, why don't you just give them stuff to do at home? Or as kids call it, homework. They're not going to do that. They're not going to do homework from an after-school activity. They do, however, go home and make their own games and then show them to me, which is so rewarding. So another difficulty that's a little more personal is that halfway through the year, the kids have the opportunity to maybe change activity, maybe try, sports, or, it's the summer semester now. They have the chance to do sports, they have the chance to do other things, or sometimes they just up and leave my activity, and it doesn't matter for the reason. It's just I feel like a failure, because I thought, darn it, I couldn't, get engaged with them. But over the years, I came to understand that, everything comes up. Maybe if it's not for them now, maybe it'll be for them at a later stage. Maybe I've planted something in there that'll hopefully someday blossom into a vocation they can use, or even just some scripting at the office and make them the heroes. And with this teaching, I learned a whole bunch of stuff that I'd love to share with you today. The first one is about breaking things. And let me tell you before we start, if there's one group of people out there that are complete masters at breaking stuff, it's children. So picture this, right? We're making a sort of space adventure kind of game where you've got a little ship and you're supposed to dodge the asteroids coming down at you. And they ask me, so Ramon, what do you think is a good speed setting for the asteroids? And I tell them, well, in this game, in this engine, it's probably a good idea to set something like 30, 40 pixels per refresh, right? But what happens? They go, okay, I'll make it, super duper high. And then they say, hey, it doesn't work. Or when it comes to another point is when it comes to, setting the number of enemies that appear on the screen, and they ask me, Ramon, what do you think is a good amount? And I'll tell them, well, 4, 5 is good too. It's a good challenge for the player. And in my head, I think, yeah, okay, they're going to make it something like 10, right? Nope. It's going to be a lot more. And the same thing threw me off later when we were making a kind of a jump and run Super Mario, Sonic the Hedgehog kind of thing, and we're supposed to set the force at which the character can, jump off the ground. And, well, you get the idea, right? You'd be surprised at how much a kid likes to hit that number 9. And at first, this used to really irritate me, right? Because I was thinking, like, I'd tell them, that's not fun to play, It's a complete disaster, and it's, nobody's going to like it, I thought to myself. And, I sat down, right, and I thought, well, why are they doing this? Why are they just breaking it? And, maybe the players is not going to have a ton of fun with that game, but the kids themselves are. And I kind of decided that that's pretty great. After a while, they'd actually, show off their complete disasters to one another and say, look, my computer doesn't work anymore. And they figured it out. They figured, well, okay, maybe if I don't put 999,999 enemies, maybe it'll work. Maybe something like 10 is more reasonable. And this reminds me that I should really, play around with the things that I have there to work with. And, sometimes that digging around and messing around with things is what solves problems. I'm sure it's happened to all of us. Next, this is something that I went in thinking, these concepts about programming are going to be really easy to teach to anybody. So I take this piece of code, I show it to the kids, and I say, all right, everybody, what's going to happen when I run this? And they know the syntax by now. They understand put s, and they understand declaring variables. And they'll say quite correctly that, it prints out Anna, which is fantastic. So I think, okay, just to make sure they've got it, right? I switch around, I say, okay, what now? And they say, well, of course, it prints out Anna, but we know that just gives us an error. And I was completely baffled by this because it hadn't occurred to me to tell them, actually, a code is run line by line, right? And I tried to turn that into a metaphor, which completely backfired on me because I told them, well, okay, so you have a book, right? And you read it line by line, and the story goes from start to finish. Kid says, yeah, okay, Ramon, have you ever read one of those choose-your-own-adventure books? Where it's like, if you want to turn left, go to page 94. If you want to go right, you turn to page 48. And those stories that start at the beginning, start at the end, and then jump back to the beginning to get back to that end at the end. And well, I'd been stumped. I gotta not take these things for granted. So this is the biggest piece of code we're gonna see from me. This is a very simple Gosu game where you have your window class, you set its size, and here we're drawing a background and a player. And a kid comes up to me and says, well, Ramon, this doesn't work. It's only drawing the background. And, well, in my head, I think, well, of course, you defined the draw method twice. You can't do that in Ruby. There's no method overloading. And kid says, I'd been stumped once again. And I keep getting stumped by them. After we learned a little bit about Ruby, and I think to myself, okay, this is the part we're going to everybody's going to get really excited because now we bring in the shiny graphics, right? And I think, okay, so I'm going to teach them a little bit about coordinates, where to draw your characters on the screen, just in case they don't know that. So I say, okay, here's your window, here's your super awesome game 4000, and here's your character, which has an X coordinate, the value along the horizontal axis, and your Y coordinate along the vertical axis. And so when both are 0, you go to the top left. And a kid says, hold on. It should be at the bottom left, because that's how I learned it in math. Why are you programmers doing this just for the sake of doing it? I didn't have a clue. I did look it up. I found something quite interesting that I'd like to share with you. You see, these old monitors, they're called CRT or cathode ray tube monitors. They used to print things from left to right, top to bottom. It makes sense to have your top left coordinate be the origin. Who knew? Well, I didn't. So about practicing. Okay, so I used to have some pretty bad habits about practicing, and that kind of came back to me when I was teaching kids. I'd tell them, here's a new concept, everybody. This is what an array is. This is how you instantiate one. This is how you, put some objects into one. This is how you remove objects from one. This is how you go through each of them and do something with them. So now that you have this knowledge, make me an array of enemies in the game and put them in and, change their values change their amounts as needed. So there you go. And then they go, nah? What? What do I do? I don't understand. And, they understood the concept of the array, but they didn't understand, first of all, why they needed to use it or how to use it. And so it was an idea given to me by my girlfriend who was doing the activity with me to instead start every session with an exercise related to something we had learned in the past or something we were going to learn and be like, okay, let's put our game away for now and do some tiny steps here. Make me a tiny array, put an enemy in it, take it out, and if we do it in these tiny chunks, I found that they were learning it better. But what happened? They weren't excited by that. They just wanted to get to their unicorns and explosions. But what happened later, and I didn't anticipate this, is that they started getting really excited about it because then it became a contest of who could defeat me, the grand master in front, right? And this kind of reminded me that it is important to practice. If you're not that good at something, you keep going at it a little bit every day and you'll be great at it. But I still can't draw. So, next up is about a little bit of introducing people to code bases or to programming languages. See, when I was teaching the kids, this is another piece of Gosu code, and I tell them, all right, everybody, this is how every time the game updates, you move your character 5 pixels to the right. You see, you take that X coordinate and you just set it to be that same value, but with 5 more. And that made sense to them. They even said, yeah, this makes sense. It's kind of like math. And I said, well, yes, exactly. And then I thought to myself, okay, and now I'm going to knock their socks off. Because, we're programmers, we're lazy, and I show them, bam, look at that. Isn't that great? You know what happened? The kid says, no, hold on. I like the other way more. And to my utter astonishment, the kids agreed with him. I couldn't understand why, but I gave it some thought, right? And even though you have something like this, which is really nice, for example, you can use this in your game if you're moving your character over to the left to make it stick to the left, right? But sometimes a little bit of verbosity can be good, I find, in helping someone be introduced to a piece of code that they haven't looked at, or introduce them to programming in general. Now, for this last point, I want to invite you with me to sort of get into the mindset of what's going on, okay? So it's like 3:30 in the afternoon. You've been shouting at them for a good half hour. Not really. And you're getting nervous because, bugs are coming up, typos are everywhere, and you want to make sure that the kids have a nice game to take home to their families and friends to be like, look what I made, which is my goal, right? And what happens? So a kid will have a bug, right? And they'll be like, oh, Ramon, what do I do? And I'm like, well, you see that maybe there's a typo somewhere. And they'll be like, oh, come on, can't you fix it for me? And I'm like, okay, fine, I'll do it this one time. So what happened? After a couple of times of doing that, a terrible rapport was created where every time they'd find a bug, they'd just throw their arms up in the air and be like, this is broken. And my heart sank. Was I creating lazy people? I hope not. So when this started happening, I panicked. I thought to myself, geez, what am I going to do? And so, next time that problem came up, a kid had this piece of code, for example. Don't worry too much about what it says. Just focus on what's missing. And he says to me, this is broken, right? And I thought, okay, I really don't have time because I have to, make sure everybody has a game. But I had this one kid who had finished, and I said, hey, come here. Can you show them how to, can you take a look at this, see what happens? And the kid immediately went, oh, well, you're missing an end. How did you not see that? And that was really cool, right? And what happened? After I asked them to do that, they kind of got the idea that it was okay to go and help each other. And completely naturally, outside of my own, outside of my doing, pair programming was happening all around me. I hadn't even used pair programming before. I had never pair programmed with anybody before, and now I know that it's a naturally occurring phenomenon. Wow! That's amazing. And what happened as a result? You get to see the way that other people solve their problems, and that sort of teaches you what their line of thinking was, and then you can, adapt yours to that. And of course, I realized that, yes, pair programming exists and it works, and that's pretty great. And so by doing these things, by showing code to people and by interacting with them, and I kind of got this, this thing, they call it confidence, right? And what happened after that, the years later? Well, I grabbed my bag and I kicked back the tears and I went to my very first Ruby meetup over in Vienna. And it was fine, and the people were lovely. And shortly after going to that meetup, I had heard of something called Rails Girls, and next thing I know, I'm coaching there, which if you haven't yet, I totally recommend you do, because it's so rewarding and you get to change people's lives with that. And next thing I know, I'm going to conferences, thinking to myself, wow, that must be great. I don't think I could talk, and yet, here we are. So, I'm helping out. I'm contributing to open source. I'm even, with this here is Team Tessie. That's my sister on the right. They did she and Shelly did the Rails Girls Summer of Code this year, and they worked on Hoodie, which is a JavaScript framework. And they learned so much, and we worked together, and it was a ton of fun, and I learned a ton. So you might be thinking, but what about the children? Well, the oldest kids that I've been teaching now are getting to 15, And they've started using something called Unity, which is a game engine for making 3D games. And they're using JavaScript for that. And I'm already getting, Steam messages from them saying stuff like, "You're going to tell me I have to put semicolons at the end of every line?" So, if there's anything to take away from here, is that I really recommend teaching. It's so much fun. You learn a ton about yourself. You learn a ton about the medium, and you get to help out people. And there's a ton of really cool resources for that too. There's a Coder Dojo, which is like independent little workshops all around the world. And I think they have a couple. I was looking it up today. They have one here in Torino as well. So check it out. That's really cool. Kids Ruby is a nice place to get a nice app for starting to program and some resources there too. There's Rails Girls, which I mentioned. There's a Summer of Code, which is also really cool. So this one I added in today based on a lovely talk I saw earlier, Sonic Pi. That looks amazing for kids. Thank you. And there's this book now called Hello Ruby, and that's meant for 5-year-olds and older, and that looks really cool too. The kids I was teaching, in case you're curious, were about 10 and 11. So, yeah, that's me. It's so short and sweet. I want to thank my girlfriend and sister for helping me with those drawings because, as I said earlier, I can't draw. I want to thank you, RubyDay, for having me here today, and I want to thank you all for listening to me.